My name is Hiba Yazbek, and I'm from. For most people, the answer to this question is clear and automatic. For me, however, it's the question I struggle with the most. See, according to the tiny document I hold, my passport, I'm from Israel. But according to my history, my blood, my narrative, and the little house on the hill in my city, Nazareth, according to my father's stories of the Nakba and the olive trees in our backyard, I am from Palestine. During the War of 1948, the war that led to Israel's independence, which we Palestinians refer to as the Nakba, or the catastrophe, many Palestinians were displaced and many were killed. One of the many people that were displaced was my father. He was born in Nazareth in 1946 and became a refugee at the age of 2. When my grandfather took his wife and children to Amman, Jordan, to find a job, after the oil refinery he worked at was shut down when Haifa was conquered by the Israeli forces. My father and his siblings lived in displacement for their whole lives and are now scattered all around the world. My father spent his entire life dreaming of coming back to Nazareth, and after 50 years of being displaced, he came back to the house on the hill. He raised me there, and I grew up in that same room he was born in 73 years ago. The reason he was able to come back and reside in Israel as a Palestinian refugee was because he married my mother, whom he met on a visit to Nazareth. My mother was born after 1948, inside the Green Line, the areas of Palestine that were declared part of the Israeli state. So her family and her were given the Israeli citizenship and resided in Nazareth after fleeing their village of Safuri that was conquered and evacuated during the war. I was born in Nazareth in 1997 and was given an Israeli citizenship, making my mom and I a part of the community of the Palestinian citizens of Israel. What a lot of people don't realize is that after the war of 1948, there are those of us who managed to stay, like my mother's family. 1.8 million Palestinians currently live in Israel, making up over 20% of the overall population. Muslims, Christians, and Druze, those of us who remained, were given the Israeli citizenship and were damned to become a marginalized minority in our own land. We are second-class citizens. The nationality law passed by the Knesset in 2017 officially classifies us as such. However, the law had only legally solidified what we have felt for decades. We are concentrated in Arab-only villages and communities. My hometown, Nazareth, is the biggest Palestinian city in Israel. Until we graduate from high school, we live in segregated, strictly Arab communities. We study only in Arabic, we eat our traditional food, and exercise most of our traditions. Our only encounters with Israelis are the ones we are obligated to have. However, after we graduate high school, if we choose to attend university, we must exit our communities, our comfort zones, and move to the big cities, since there are no Arab universities in Israel. Some choose to study abroad, while others choose to take on the challenge of studying at an Israeli university in order to stay closer to their families. I grew up in Nazareth. Most of you know Nazareth from the Bible, the holy town where Jesus grew up. But it's so much more than that. Let me tell you about my Nazareth. Nazareth is a Palestinian city in a Jewish country where Muslims and Christians live side by side. Every December, thousands of Muslims celebrate at the local Christmas festival. And every Ramadan, Christians break their fast with their Muslim neighbors. The deep-rooted community and sense of belonging were all I knew in Nazareth. However, my beautiful city suffered and still suffers many injustices. Although Nazareth is a part of the state of Israel, a state that defines itself as a democracy, and it's officially recognized by the international community as such, it receives significantly less funding from the Israeli government than Jewish cities. This is not the case only for Nazareth, but also for all other Arab towns and villages in Israel. Our infrastructure is deeply damaged. We do not have a single public hospital. Our water and sewage systems are far less developed, and we don't even have one park where kids can play. My historical city of Nazareth can't be expanded or developed. Our streets are so narrow, and we suffer from an extreme lack of residential lands. so much so that people are forced to build their houses on top of each other's. But most notably, our public school system is broken. Arab public schools receive less than half of the funding that Jewish public schools receive in Israel, resulting in great gaps in the levels of education, which lead to even greater gaps in the levels of university education, which eventually lead to great gaps in the job market. This reality persists even though we pay in taxes as much as all other citizens of Israel do, and we greatly contribute to the economy and the workforce. If you have kids in Nazareth, you only have two options. One is to send them to a public school and watch their future disintegrate. The other is to send them to a private school and pay a great sum of money. I was lucky enough to go to a private Christian school, which allowed me the opportunity to join a program that changed my life. Model United Nations, where I was a member for my 4 years of high school. MUN, a simulation of the United Nations in English, not only allowed me to develop my English skills, my negotiation skills, and my public speaking skills, it also contributed to my political awareness and love for justice. We debated countless topics in numerous committees on a weekly basis, each of us representing the delegation of a different country. We wrote resolutions, clause by clause, and submitted amendments. But most of all, we became a family, a group of young, bright, politically aware Palestinian citizens of Israel. Together, we traveled all around Israel, attending MUN conferences. Often, we were the only Arab delegation in the conference. And my group and I started the first ever Arab MUN conference in Israel, which today, 6 years later, is one of the biggest in the country. Model UN was the reason I was excited to go to school every day. And it was what sparked my commitment to political activism. After I graduated high school, I chose to commit to the challenge of studying at an Israeli university. For the past 3 years, I've been living and studying in Tel Aviv. The transition from Nazareth to Tel Aviv was extremely challenging. It was my first time living with and around Jewish Israelis and conducting my life in Hebrew, since the official language of Israeli universities is Hebrew, which is my third language. In addition, the community in Tel Aviv was drastically different from anything I was used to. For the first time in my life, I felt like a minority in my own land. I started experiencing microaggressions and discrimination on a daily basis. I suddenly became the other, the enemy. Simple daily tasks like speaking on the bus in Arabic became a challenge. During my first year, I tried to rent an apartment in Tel Aviv. It was almost impossible because every landlord I spoke to hung up as soon as they heard Arabic in my Hebrew accent. After 3 years, I realized that my community, the Palestinian citizens of Israel, face a unique set of challenges that are never discussed in the context of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. We face a mental and emotional occupation. Our checkpoints and walls are in the shape of disgusted looks and name-calling in the street. Our military detentions are in the form of being made to believe that we are less than, that we are unequal, and don't deserve anything better. Our clashes are mostly with ourselves, as our identity is constantly being argued against, as we are told we don't belong to either side. My identity is a constant reminder that I don't belong in Tel Aviv. I carry it with me, and it's evident in everything I do or say. I will never feel like I belong or that I'm welcome. I will never feel at home in my own home. During my first week of university, I signed up to the MUN Society there, in hope of feeling like I belonged to something on campus. I was accepted and proceeded to become a member for 3 years. During my second year, I was on the organizing team of the Tel Aviv University Model United Nations International Conference. And during my third year, I was on the board of directors of the society. MUN was yet again my community on campus. However, this time was different. I was still the minority in the society. I was the first ever Arab woman to be on the board of directors of the Tel Aviv University Model UN Society, which is sad if you ask me. But during my 3 years in university level MUN, I made my first Israeli friend, and I made a few others after that. I traveled with Israelis to 5 different countries to participate in conferences. And I broke at least one of the mental barriers I had, the fear of the other side. And most importantly, I broke some of their perceptions and stereotypes about Palestinians. Every time we traveled to a conference together, however, I would get reminded that I'm not their equal. When we get to airport security and I get selected for a random security check, the Israeli delegates go through security quickly without even paying attention to the questions that they are asked, while I'm taken aside, asked invasive questions, and strip searched. After 3 years of working together, after being voted on the board of directors and traveling and learning together, I was still the Arab girl. I was still the other. Just last night, I received a hateful message from one of my fellow board members. After he watched one of my speeches that I made at the Congress, where I expressed the struggles of my community faces, he argued that I'm ungrateful to the country I live in by speaking out against it. But why am I ungrateful if I simply want to be equal? Why am I ungrateful if I don't want to have to work twice as hard to get half the reward? Why am I ungrateful if I want the word Palestinian to stop being synonymous to the word random security check? Why am I ungrateful if I want to be able to speak my native tongue without stirring discomfort? Or if I want to not be called a terrorist in my own land? James Baldwin once said, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced." All the challenges and inequalities I faced and my community faced daily prompted me to want to change our reality, my reality, through telling my story and giving a voice to my unheard and unrecognized community. Thank you.
Okay, so shalom and hello everyone. I am Gilad Sevitt from Jerusalem, and thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity to speak here. I want to share with you a small little problem that I have been suffering from all of my life, and I am an optimist. An optimist means that whenever people tell me how can you even imagine a better reality, seeing this reality that we live here, which is so hard and difficult, I say that we have to imagine a better future because of this hard reality that we live in. But slowly with time, I understood that hopeful sentences and imagination is just not enough. And together with hope, we really need action. So I want to tell you a story today that might not give you thousands of reasons for hope, but it can give you one reason that can be both a source for hope and also a tool for all of us to create a better future. I was born, raised, and still live in Jerusalem, which is a very complicated city to grow up in. Jerusalem is sort of like a microcosm of the society in Israel that we just heard of. A society where Jews and Arabs live together, but actually we're completely separated. We don't go to the same schools, we don't eat in the same restaurants. But maybe one of the manifestations of this division, a very main manifestation, is the division in language. So while most Arabs do speak Hebrew, because they have to, only about 5% of Israeli Jews can communicate in Arabic. 5%. Now the fact that we don't speak Arabic leads to a vicious cycle of miscommunication between us. So this vicious cycle of miscommunication leads to a lot of ignorance and fear and hatred that again leads to the fact that we just do not speak to each other. I myself learned Arabic for 9 years, but still after 9 years, both in school and in the army, I wasn't even able to say one sentence. This is partly because we're learning the modern standard Arabic, which is completely different from the colloquial Arabic that people actually speak, but mostly because we are not encouraged to speak with people who live with us. So I think I was always I found it interesting why we're learning words like government and ministries and treaties, but we don't even know how to say my grandmother or what's up or very simple things. So I was 22 years old, 6 years ago, and I find myself not knowing Arabic after 9 years of learning, and I really wanted to speak to the people around me. So I bought all books I could find about colloquial Arabic, and I started to speak to people in the streets that I just didn't know. I've made thousands of super embarrassing mistakes. I'm gonna share with you one. I went to a restaurant and I ordered something like 5 non-vegetarian dishes, even though I was vegetarian and I was sitting alone. So this is one out of many. But slowly and surely I reached a level where I could finally speak Arabic well enough to converse. And now for a very long time, my friends and I didn't find it very unique or weird that I speak Arabic. We used to go to the old city of Jerusalem, which is 5 minutes walk from my house. We do it still weekly, on a weekly basis, every weekend. And I was speaking with Palestinians and they didn't, just because I was the Israeli who speaks Arabic. They really treated me like I'm this nerdy guy that loves languages, and one of the languages I liked was Arabic. But slowly I began to understand that actually speaking Arabic had a very strong effect on my life. And I noticed many things that I never even thought of. I realized that we as Israelis live in the middle of the Arab world. I realized that instead of being intimidated by it, I became more and more interested in the world around me. 24 countries around Israel speak Arabic. 5 million Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza speak Arabic. 22% of the population in Israel, Palestinian citizens of Israel, speak Arabic. I also learned that Arabic was a very, very central language in the Jewish heritage and history and tradition and religion. So I found it very surprising. How come only 5% of us can communicate in the language? That is, by the way, the 5th most spoken language in the world and is incredibly similar to Hebrew, both of them Semitic languages. So I think that if I put the numbers aside, maybe the most important thing that happened to me as a result of being able to communicate in Arabic is that I made friends. I made closer connections and I saw reality from many different perspectives. So I still remember how every time I spoke to an Arab, it started with walls and it ended with jokes. And this experience happens every single day up until today. This was a complete transformation. So 5 years ago, when I was 23 years old, I decided to share my knowledge, hoping that maybe more people will want to learn. I gave free lessons of spoken Arabic at my parents' living room. It was really fun, and people really liked it, maybe because instead of teaching how to pour Arabic coffee like in the traditional way, I was teaching useful, daily, non-biased phrases that I learned from my friends. I really enjoyed the lessons myself, people enjoyed it as well, but I then faced 2 very serious problems. One is that people did not understand my handwriting, because I don't have such a wonderful handwriting. The second is that my parents' living room was just not big enough for all the people who wanted to come to the free lessons. Hundreds of people wanted to join, and not long after, together with my friends, a group of Jews and Arabs, we turned these lessons from my parents' living room into YouTube lessons. This was the beginning of Madrasa, school in Arabic. Madrasa is a website, teaches colloquial Arabic completely for free. We started as this small social initiative, offering fun educational videos, and we've received hundreds of positive comments on our materials and on our way of teaching. I remember how we set a group of Israelis and Palestinians looking on the Madrasa's Gmail, and we've just received dozens of comments of people sharing with us what were their interactions with people after they learned Arabic from our website. I also remember what we felt when we saw selfies of people from all across the country meeting, people that we don't know that just met in order to learn together from our website. This wasn't only an approval for my naive sense of optimism. I think this is what taught us about the power of language and communication to generate a massive social change. So we decided to keep on going. We raised some money through a crowdfunding campaign, and we became an organization that offers any Hebrew speaker the opportunity to learn spoken colloquial Arabic through a groundbreaking, free, interactive online course that is used today by tens of thousands of people in Israel. So we created a social movement of people learning Arabic, and we call it Learning to Communicate. Thousands of people are answering each other's questions and sharing vocabulary and jokes in Arabic through the social media. Schools, universities, and public institutions that we collaborate with are using our platform to teach their students and their employees. And now we bring people together outside of the screen. And Arabic speakers are facilitating meetups where people eat, meet, and practice what they've learned online. We started now in Jerusalem, and we plan to hold these meetups on a weekly basis in every single city in Israel. We're making sure that Arabic is learned everywhere, from north to south, in every home, office, or class, and in every single smartphone. All of this is completely for free. Madrasa has a very clear vision: to see a society in Israel that can communicate not only in Hebrew and English, but also in Arabic. In such a society, for people taking the train in Jerusalem, hearing Arabic will not be a sign of a threat, but rather a nice memory of many of our grandparents who used to speak it as their mother tongue. In such a society, Arabic will allow equity and equal opportunities to Arab students and employees and people who want to speak their mother tongue when they go to get medical care. When people will speak Arabic, this vicious cycle of miscommunication that leads to fear, that leads to hatred, will be replaced by genuine communication. I have only 2 stickers in my room in Jerusalem. One is a quote by Margaret Mead that says, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world." Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. This gave me a lot of hope. But only when I saw the voices of my friends, my Arab friends from East Jerusalem, being played in thousands of headphones around Israel, teaching people daily communication, like asking, "How are you?" or "Where do you live?" This is when I decided to put the second sticker on. נתעלם נתواصل, לומדים לתקשר, learning to communicate. So what is my hope? My hope is to see in a year or 2 from now that every single child in Israel will open the schedule for the upcoming week and will wait for a class called Learning to Communicate. These children will not have to wait 9 years like I did in order to start learning to speak the language of their neighbors. I want to finish with another quote, now by Nelson Mandela, that serves like a mantra to my team during our work. If you talk to people in a language they understand, that goes to their head. But if you talk to them in their own mother tongue, that goes to their heart. We all know how desperately we need that people will start talking to the hearts of each other. I really believe this is the best infrastructure that we can offer in order to start building a better future. Thank you very much.
Please join us. Well, let me start by welcoming you all again to this evening's program and to thank our organizing partners as well as our host, Stimson, with whom we collaborate on a regular basis, and we couldn't be prouder of this partnership. We are going to have about 25 minutes of moderated discussions with our principal speakers. But we want to give other students, participating students of this program, the opportunity to also answer some of the questions we're going to be asking if you're inclined to do so. So you just have to raise your hand. We'll make this work. So I feel extremely inspired by this session. So thank you, Andrew, for bringing your former hat to collaborate with UNA-NCA. As many as you know, the role of young people, of youth, in shaping peace processes, in building peace, has gained increased international attention and acknowledgement. And we have Resolution 2055, Security Council Resolution 2055 on peace, youth, peace, and security that is a testament of this trend. And this trend also shows a fundamental shift from seeing youth as a perpetrator or victim of violence to looking at them from the perspective of peace builders, peacemakers, and the ones who should be driving the peace processes. And I'm very proud to see the international community and all the different structures within the UN and other mechanisms recognizing this. But of course, this also comes with challenges. And the challenges of bringing space for youth to express themselves. And in the case of the Middle East, this is a region that has over 30%, I believe, of people from ages 15 to 29 who are not feeling included in the regional political decision-making processes. And that's a problem because they're losing faith in political systems. That's one of many regions, and I'm from Latin America, I can speak for that. But anyways, with all these challenges, opportunities also come, and I feel very, very inspired by your personal stories earlier, so thank you very much. We're going to start with the first question. Cell phones off, please. The UN has always been involved in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, from passing resolutions to conducting investigations to making the conflict the center of the discussions at times of escalation. How do your respective communities see the role of the UN in creating a path for lasting peace? Do you see the UN having a critical, relevant role at the local level? And I want you to also think about the Agenda 2030, the Global Goals for Sustainable Development, when you're answering this question. Are there any specific goals that could be highlighted as both challenge but also as an opportunity for building peace and cultural understanding? Shall we give ladies?
Yeah.
Is my mic on?
Yes.
So in terms of the UN's role in the conflict, it's interesting because usually Palestinians in the international community are being paid less attention to, but in the case of the UN, it's almost the only unbiased or less biased organization where we feel like they are truly working to promote human rights in Palestine. Specifically for refugees, I met a Palestinian refugee in Lebanon last year who grew up at a refugee camp and who went to honor schools her whole life. And now she's studying medicine. And she always talks about how without those honor schools, she would be nowhere right now. So from countless refugee camps, from UNRWA, from all the aid that is being given, and also the United Nations is the main voice that Palestinians have in terms of asking for human rights. And also it's an organization that brings countries into the discussion that usually wouldn't be in the discussion of the conflict because it's an inclusive organization. In terms of the specific goals that I feel like need more attention, obviously from my speech, goal number 4, quality education, because if it weren't for the education I got in a private school, I wouldn't be here right now because I wouldn't have joined these programs that have gotten my career advanced. And I'm in pain for the people who don't have this opportunity back home, who don't have the opportunity to study at decent schools and travel like I did and experience life and see all the opportunities that they have. So I think the main goal that should be focused on is quality education because then the conversation could be equal.
Yes, I completely agree with everything that has been said, and I think that the UN can and should represent our struggle for common goals, because what happens is that we always discuss the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and there's this list of issues we need to solve, and each side maybe thinks different things or maybe not about these issues. But then when you look on the sustainable development goals of the UN, you suddenly remember that, hey, most of us, even if we will solve the conflict, will still need to develop education in our countries and water issues, and water that we drink in Israel it will be the same water that people drink in Gaza, and the air that I breathe in Jerusalem is the same air that people breathe in Ramallah. And I think that the UN can really represent this struggle for mutual work, and can also be a tool for us to work together. I always think of this example of, I know that Israel is very famous for its water technologies. If Israel is so famous for its water technologies, how come 97% of the water in Gaza is not drinkable, where 2 million people live? Obviously, I do understand that there are political situations that lead to that, but what I see is that, like, in the end of the day, the work that we need to do should be less of a political work and more of a humanitarian and developing goals that are just shared by all humanity. And I think that the UN should be the power that pushes to these goals.
And you should know that the UN has a department of political and peacebuilding affairs and a specific office on the special coordinator for the Middle East peace process. So those are the mechanisms in the region that are there to support the Secretary General efforts for peace.
Yeah, and maybe this exactly shows how some of the goals are sort of like the end goal. For example, water, we have to take care of water issues. Other goals, like Hiba mentioned, education, is something that if we invest in this one, we can really afterwards work together in order to invest for the other goals. So working against inequalities and working towards peace and justice can help us to work together to the other goals.
They're all interconnected.
No, and I'm glad you highlighted that Goal 16, the peace-building goal, is often referred to as most important for promoting peace between cultures, but you're highlighting the point that no work on the entire massive 2030 agenda, 16 other goals, many very specific on education, as you highlighted, Hiba, healthcare, that these are the ways to get people at least communicating and talking, let alone working on issues, and overcome mistrust and build reconciliation that's needed. Wish to hear first from any other participants of your summer program, if you have a favorite sustainable development goal, before we get into some other very specific issues related to these themes of peace building and the role of the United Nations. But don't be shy, start thinking about that. Feel free to come anytime during the conversation. And thank you both, Gilad and Hiba, for your very inspiring opening remarks, not just about hope and aspirations, but the actions that you're involved with Jusoor and Madrasa, your organizations, really building a better future in your region. And on back to education, UNESCO is a famous UN agency for education, science, cultural organization. An area that's probably overlooked are the 12 different World Heritage Sites that are located throughout Israel-Palestine region as a whole, and wondering if the fact that so many visitors from around the world come in to learn about your amazing region, that these cultural icons that are celebrated worldwide could be a source for a shared identity, shared understanding. How specifically could just those really important monuments for world history be sources of a dialogue, but specifically getting young Israelis and Palestinians to work together, to communicate more and understand each other, building on programs like the one you're participating this summer here in Washington, D.C. Who would like to jump in first?
Yeah, I mean, I think that all of these sites have energy in them, whether some people believe that it's a spiritual or a religious energy, and other people just understand that they have energy because of the meaning that we charge into those places. I think the question is, how do we channel this energy to a good place? So the old city in Jerusalem, which is just 5 minutes, like this is the old city of Jerusalem, this is a park, this is my house. So I literally see the old city, and I have to go only downhill if I want to go and visit the place. The only problem is to come back. But anyway, I think it's one of the heritage sites, and it's a very, very, very beautiful place. It has small little lanes and many, many, many churches, and I go there every week with my friends, and I see thousands of tourists visiting it. So it's a very beautiful place. But if you will ask some other friends of mine who can consider themselves as lefties in Israel, they don't go there because they think it's scary and there are stabbings there. So I think that like what we make out of a place is important on the same level of what this place really is. Other friends of mine collected a group of Israelis and Palestinians and brought garbage bags, and they collected 50 garbage bags and cleaned the old city of Jerusalem, which is unfortunately was very polluted. And they also painted together a beautiful wall on one of the non-ancient walls of Israel, on some nice wall over there. And this was a very nice project. I think it's called Jerusalem Art. You can look for it. So again, I think it is important not only to relate to these sites as, oh, they're here for 2,000 years, so they're important, but rather to think what we can do with them today in 2019 to make them an inspiration for a mutual shared society, reality, etc.
Yeah, so I'm from Nazareth, and in Nazareth, I think we have at least half of those World Heritage.
Wow.
No, I'm kidding. I don't know how many, but we have a few, and we get the main source of income in Nazareth is tourism because of these World Heritage sites. But it's interesting because although Nazareth is so rich in history and heritage and religious monuments, the government still doesn't pay as much attention to it as they should. We get thousands of tourists a day, but the water is still dirty and the garbage is still in the streets, and the roads are still bumpy, and so you would think that because of the significance, more attention would be paid to Nazareth, but it's actually not. And another interesting thing is, you said, how do you think these sites bring young Jews and Palestinians together? Every time I tell a Jewish Israeli that I'm from Nazareth, the first thing they would say is, oh, the church, or oh, the old market. So the only thing they know about my city are these World Heritage sites. So it's a good conversation starter most of the time, but it's also a good way to show them that there's more to Nazareth than these sites. And if you do go for like a day trip and eat some falafel and knafe, it doesn't mean that you know us. It doesn't mean that you can talk to us in the way we should, understand each other.
Please. And we have a rotating microphone. Bring up to you. And please kindly introduce yourself and mention maybe what town you're coming from.
Hi, I'm Thawra Abu Khadir. I'm from Shafat, which is a Palestinian village north of Jerusalem. I was born and raised, and I still live there. I think that your question is very interesting. First of all, I look at the World Heritage Sites from the context that you put it in as it's like a common ground. It's kind of a protected common ground that people can gather and relate to this internationally renowned site. And it's very interesting because I worked in a coalition called Lifta Coalition. And this coalition is to save Lifta. It's a bunch of Israelis and Palestinians. I worked with my professor was the creator of this coalition. Her name is Daphna Golan, and she created this so that we can save the remainings of Lifta, which was a village that was evacuated in 1948 in West Jerusalem. We can save it from future settlement plans and all that. And one of the main suggestions on how to save it was to register it as a World Heritage Site, because the houses from before 1948 are still there, and there's this water spring, and also it's a holy place for Jewish people as well, and because it has holy water there and all that. And I think that was a very interesting thing to do, and our only way to save it from being destroyed.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you. All right. I like the way you put it. It's a good starter for conversations around peace and cultural diversity. All right. There is frequent conflict and unrest at the Palestinian borders, not only with Israel, but also with Jordan and Israel concerning border crossings operated by armed forces. So regardless of the type of border, is there a specific role opportunity for UN peacekeepers through the missions that are currently there that could help make these borders safer, more stable, ensure crossings are better regulated, staffed?
Yeah, so as I mentioned in my speech, my father immigrated to Amman, Jordan, and he has a Jordanian passport. He does not have an Israeli passport. And I still have family in Amman, so we go there 6 to 8 times a year, which means we have to cross the border 6 to 8 times a year. And since my father only has a Jordanian passport, we are always searched. So they take our car, they break it apart. Yeah, they take off the wheels, they take off everything, they inspect the car, and then they take us to a separate part of the border where they, we go through machines and stuff. And we've been going to that border 6 to 8 times a year for over 25 years, my parents, and they know us. Every time we go there, they know us, but they still do the same inspection over and over. And my father is an old man, and it's really hard for him, to go through that every time. He has to go visit his son in Amman. So I think one of the things that the UN peacekeeping missions can focus on is just monitoring what's happening on these borders. In the checkpoints and the borders are some of the only times that Palestinians meet Israelis. People from Gaza and the West Bank. These are the only times that they meet Israelis is at the border. The border security officers with rifles and with a uniform, and most of the stuff that happens on these borders is unreported. Unless you speak to people who go through them, unless you ask them, how's your experience? So I think better just monitoring what's going on the borders and making sure that people are being treated like humans, first of all, should be one of the main objectives of these missions.
So peacekeepers from at least the missions that are in the area are nowhere to be seen on those very critical points?
At the Jordanian border, no, I've never seen them. We also cross through the border to Jenin, which is in the West Bank, because my aunt lives there. We go a few times a year, and the same thing happens with my father. And there's no air conditioning where they have us wait, and in the summer it's a disaster. We wait for 2 or 3 hours, no air conditioning in closed off rooms. And I'm an Israeli citizen, and my mom's an Israeli citizen, so you would think we would at least get better treatment.
Absolutely. This definitely needs to be communicated because the UN is reevaluating the way the missions are being carried out to make it more efficient and effective, and this is an important aspect. Do you have anything to add to that?
I think Hiba said it well, but I think that this is something that I hear a lot whenever we meet here Palestinians and they share the stories about the first time they meet an Israeli, and they always say that, up until then, all I knew about Israelis was I imagined people holding a rifle and wearing a uniform. And I mean, if there's any chance to break this image so we could start doing the real work, which is building trust and a little bit of understanding between people, I think we should seize this opportunity. So I'm not a security expert, I'm expert in Arabic dialectology, but I don't know if the UN is the right organization to be the one in charge of the borders. What I do know is that 18 years old Israeli soldiers with guns and uniforms are the only image that Palestinians have on Israelis sometimes, and this definitely does not help. So, yes.
Couldn't agree more.
Maybe I can share something.
Absolutely. Tell us who you are first.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Muhammad from Gaza. It doesn't work.
Now it works.
No.
It's okay. Hi, my name is Muhammad from Gaza. Since you mentioned this topic about leaving the Palestinian territories to Jordan, I just wanted to mention something that Palestinians living in the West Bank and Palestinians living in Gaza are treated unfairly by the authorities. For example, if I want to go to Jordan, I have to apply for a non-objection permission, which mostly gets sadly rejected. But if, for example, a West Banker, Palestinian from the West Bank want to cross the border to Jordan, he just or she just uses her passport without applying for permission. So all of us are Palestinians, but sadly we are mistreated, you know. And another thing, sadly, if I want to leave the Gaza Strip, I have to, for example, like leave it through Egypt or Israel. And if I want to leave it through Israel, I have to apply for 3 permissions from 3 different authorities, including the Jordanian government. And if I want to leave it through Egypt, it's completely impossible nowadays, because most of the time the border is closed and they just allow specific number of people to leave the Gaza Strip. I just wanted to share this with you because I believe that not everybody knows about this. Thank you.
We appreciate that. We definitely appreciate that. This is what it's all about.
So we've been highlighting, as the United Nations Association and research interest of Stimson is strengthening the UN, and sometimes we think of it as these international civil servants who can come in and help solve problems and provide all kinds of support. But the Youth, Peace, and Security agenda was referred to by Paula, and this is how we'd like to conclude our moderated discussion portion before we open it up and hear questions from the audience as a whole, is youth as agents for change. That yes, they can be provided some kind of technical, financial, even political support, but give us your thoughts, maybe drawing on your experiences with your organization Madrasa, with your Jusoor project, of young people being part of the solution and not just helping maybe to reduce tensions, in this case between young Israelis and Palestinians, but to even address some of the root causes of the conflict. And it doesn't have to be between the younger generation. Maybe they're part of the solution and there's quite a difference in how they perceive and address these issues compared to older generations. Tell us your perspective on, besides your own direct experiences, what you're also observing in society in terms of young people being agents for change, for advancing peace building and creating conditions for peace and hope.
I have to say that I would never do what I did in Madrasa if I wasn't part of a group called activists. It's not a certain group, it's a huge wave of people that are just reacting to their reality. There is a forum called the Jerusalem Model of 200 activists in Jerusalem that are trying to create a better Jerusalem, but it's not only this forum. Some of my friends are just living their life as normal people. Others are just reacting to the difficult reality that we see. I did it through Madrasa. Many others did it through different organizations. I'll give one example of one Facebook page of people, of a friend of mine that wanted to show the life of Gaza, but the not political life, not the bombings, not the rockets, not Hamas, but actually he just opened a Facebook page that collects posts from about 200 other Facebook pages, which are just the normal life in Gaza, and he translates them to Hebrew in order to also show Israelis that Gaza is not only about Hamas and da-da-da-da-da. That's one small little, and I have, I'm happy to say that I have a lot of other examples of not only Facebook pages, but real organizations that make a huge impact. And I think that maybe to conclude my point, some of the young generation does not know what to do. They wake up, they drink their coffee, they go to university, they go to work, they drink a beer and they go back to sleep. This is very normal, maybe because of despair, maybe because of different reasons. But those of them who do wake up to the fact that actually what we live needs to end, we cannot live in this conflict for all of our lives, do decide to react and to act and to do something about it. And I think that if one thing that I want to do back in Israel, except for continuing to work on Madrasa and creating a society in Israel that can communicate in Arabic, which is not a simple task, is to see more of my friends active and reacting to what they experience. Yes.
And given your response, if you could also add, are there one or two specific ways the UN could do things differently, do things better, to make sure young people are leaders and helping to solve problems rather than seeming more passive beneficiaries of outside assistance?
Yeah, so I think our generation is unique because we grew up
listening to the stories of our parents and grandparents and how the conflict has affected their lives. But we also grew up hearing how they didn't do anything to change it. And we're scared to end up like our parents. We're scared to end up like our grandparents. We're scared that in the future, our children will live in the same reality that we're living in. So I think more and more people in my generation are taking initiative and are trying to advocate for themselves and trying to provide a future that they want to see. Our generation we've been through a lot in the conflict in the region, and we're angry. A lot of us are angry, but there's a difference between the anger that generates hate and the anger that generates productivity. And I think what I'm seeing amongst my peers is our anger is generating productivity. We're starting initiatives like Gilad and I and our friends in the group, and we are just working to provide our own futures. In terms of what the UN can do, is give us a voice. Just give us a voice, because a lot of us are struggling to have our voices heard. Here, the two of us here, we're lucky enough to be able to leave the area and to, share our voice and our stories. But a lot of Palestinians are going through, and a lot of Israelis are going through some daily struggles that are never heard. And with social media these days, it's easier to spread the message. For example, on Monday, the Israeli government started demolishing homes in a neighborhood in East Jerusalem, and the media didn't report on it, but social media did. And that's how I think our generation, my generation, is becoming more aware of what's happening. Like Israelis they know about the demolitions that are happening in East Jerusalem because they saw some of their friends share it on Facebook. Because the news is not saying what we have to say. So our voices, I think, through empowering our voices, the UN, through Model UN programs for young people in high schools and in colleges, these programs will give people my age the resources to go out and share our stories and share our voices and be political activists in our community.
That's exactly right. And this is a very unique moment, even though there's a lot of challenges, geopolitical challenges around the world. I think youth is gaining a level of visibility at the local, national, and global levels. I mean, you can see what's happening in the climate, with the climate movement, and who's driving that movement. So keep up what you're doing and inspire others. This is about, giving the tools such as Model UN or other opportunities to get other folks to feel that it's possible to create positive change. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it.
So now we have about 20 minutes left for general audience questions and participation. And when you raise your hand, please kindly introduce yourself, and you can either direct it to one of our featured guests, panelists, or any of the members of the New Story Leadership Program. While you're collecting your thoughts, I do want to welcome, though, our 6 participants of this year's summer program. If you'd like to share any points on any of the questions that were raised, favorite sustainable development goal, but in particular, we're eager to hear the examples of young people taking charge in your own community, so sharing some of your own insights and experiences is something that we would love to hear before the conclusion of our program today.
Hi, again. So my name is Thora again. Being part of NSL is just a continuation of my political activism that started a few years ago. In 2014, I don't know if you all remember, but 3 Israeli settlers were kidnapped and murdered by Palestinians in the West Bank. And then the Palestinian perpetrators, they were shot down and killed, and their families' homes were demolished just 3 months after it happened. And then that same summer in July 2014, Mohammed Abu Qadir, a Palestinian boy, 16-year-old boy from Shafat, was kidnapped and burned alive by 3 Israeli settlers in East Jerusalem. And I mean, that boy was my cousin Mohammed. And it took us 3 years to put the perpetrators in jail. And one of them got life sentence and the others got 20 years each, but only because we pushed very hard and very long under the international spotlight in the social media, in leaking surveillance videos of the kidnap being conducted. And so this international pressure got us a little bit of justice. And that led me to conclude that I, Thawra, as an East Jerusalemite, I'm part of a very vulnerable community, very unprotected community that is unrepresented in the Israeli government and not represented in the Palestinian government either, because we don't have a citizenship. We don't have Israeli citizenship, we don't have Palestinian citizenship. And so, just like Hiba said, I took it upon myself and to take initiative and to take control of my narrative. And that leads me here to NSL to share my story on different platforms, such as, for example, the Congress, where decisions are being made that will affect my life back home, and they have no idea, and they've never met a Palestinian or an Israeli before, yet they're making decisions for us. And so having my voice in a platform like that felt very powerful, and I did feel like I changed something, or at least just the people, my peers, the interns, the other interns that I was interning with, just gave them a very personal perspective about what's happening. As for what for my project for change as, in NSL is, a year ago, which is also part of me taking initiative, is I discovered that I graduated from the Hiba University, graduated with journalism and Spanish literature, right? And I graduated, I finished, and I realized that people around me didn't. I realized that people around me did not have even high school degrees. And then when I looked at the statistics, I saw that there is a 30 to 40% high school dropout rate in East Jerusalem. And my cousins are in that percentage, and I didn't want them to be. And so, and of course, the majority, I'm sad to say of course, but the majority of this, the dropouts are women, Palestinian women from different towns in Jerusalem. And so what I did was I started an organization going door to door, advocating for education. I recruited volunteers and teachers and took them along with me and just tutored those young women just to finish high school at least, and to put them into college, help them apply for college, and make sure that they stay in college. And yeah, I even hired my own mother, who went back to study English literature at a university in the West Bank. And yeah, so that's one of the things. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
Can I share something else? Yeah. Being a Palestinian from Gaza, I feel like Palestinians of Gaza are really isolated, you know, because since the Israeli siege in 2006, which was imposed in 2006, which affects every side in our life in the Gaza Strip, it affects the unemployment rate, which raised from 50% to 82% right now, which is the highest in the world according to the World Bank. For example, my cousin, he was graduated from the university. He didn't find a job, so he was forced to go to the Israeli borders where his farm was to harvest strawberries from there, so he can sell and feed his family. But sadly, during a morning 2011, an Israeli soldier shot him, killed in the head, just because he was working in his land, which is located near the Israeli border. And until today, his mom wakes up every morning hugging his photo, not believing that he was killed. That's only about the unemployment. We have only like 2 hours of electricity every day, only 2 hours. Like, I have been waiting to call my family since like 3 hours, and until now I couldn't call them. the water in the Gaza Strip is completely unclean. 97% of the water in the Gaza Strip is unclean, and according to the United Nations latest report, it is stated that Gaza will be unlivable by 2020, just after a few months, imagine. So things over there are really, really complicated. You know, even like leaving the Gaza Strip, I just mentioned something. Leaving the Gaza Strip is, right now, is almost impossible, and coming back to the Gaza Strip is also impossible sometimes. In 2016, I lost my scholarship from London, Warwick University, because I couldn't leave. And I spent 3 years trying to leave the Gaza Strip. Then I got to Chile after 3 years trying, imagine, 3 years. And right now, thousands of my colleagues and friends and people from Gaza lose their scholarships daily because they cannot either get visas because we don't have embassies in the Gaza Strip, or because they cannot get, they get visas but they cannot leave the Gaza Strip because they get their visas rejected. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing this hard realities.
And please kindly introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'll quickly introduce myself and the project I'm working on. My name is Dana. I'm from a tiny village 3 miles north of the West Bank inside the Israeli borders. I grew up in a fairly right-leaning family, and even though I live very close by to Jenin, a fairly big city in the West Bank, I met a Palestinian person only when I was 24, when I was studying abroad. And that process really opened my eyes to other narratives that exist out there that I wasn't exposed to. One of the things I'm working on right now is to not only show the international community and let the international community hear the voices, but bring the international community to the region to not only hear one voice that is valid and important but is still biased, but to show a variety, a broad spectrum of perspectives, both from the Israeli and the Palestinian side of the conflict. And I think only then we can reduce the bias, reduce the echo chamber, and have a conversation that is more productive and even. I know it's not even, it's a big word to say as an Israeli. Myself, I don't think the situation is even at all. But at least the conversation could be more on even grounds. So this is what I do back home, and if you haven't been in the region, I urge you to do that.
Thank you for sharing. Other questions or thoughts? Otherwise, I'm going to follow up on that. The role of the international community, and particularly I want to build on this experience you're having this summer in Washington, D.C. The UN isn't just these international civil servants. It's not even the organization, We the Peoples, as we like to emphasize. That's why we have a United Nations Association. That's why we asked about the relationship with your generation and empowering young people. But let's hear your thoughts now after your internships and experiences here in Washington. What can one of the most powerful leading members, founding member of the United Nations, that's why it's based in New York City and the charter was signed in San Francisco, what could the United States be doing better to work with the UN peace negotiator and the quartet to facilitate the process? We've been waiting anxiously for this peace plan ideas to come out of the White House. What are your thoughts of what that should include, and what could the U.S. be doing better or differently to facilitate peace and reconciliation?
I mean, there are many things, but I think there are many human rights violations happening right now, and I'm sure that my Palestinian peers can attest to it. But I think that there is a major role to the UN to supervise and to hold Israel accountable for these things, because only then, when the justice is made, we can only start talking about peace. Start talking about peace when there are checkpoints and child arrests and a lot of other house demolitions and a lot of international law being violated. How can we talk about peace from this point? And I'm saying this as an Israeli who tries to but take more responsibility over this and create change within my community. But I think international pressure is essential.
I also think that from working on a hill, as I said before, it lacks personal perspective, lacks testimonies, lacks people like us to give our own experience, to convey and express our own experience, because people are making peace plans, are, you know, talking about 2-state, 1-state, whatever solution there is, and then asking me, you know, without even asking me a question, without even asking me, what do you think should happen? What are you going through? Why do you think we should have a 2-state solution? Why are we even having this conversation about a solution? What's happening on the field? And I think that we lack personal perspective and just testimonies.
As I said earlier, is providing more opportunities to bring in youth, young people, to critical political decision-making processes, or when peace-building programs are being, designed for the region, involve the young people earlier in the process. It's providing those spaces for feedback.
Any questions?
I had a question for Gilad.
And introduce and mention where you're working this summer.
Oh yeah, I'm Paula Lloyd, and I'm have an internship on Capitol Hill this summer. I'm working for Congressman Dan Crenshaw. He's the eye patch. I don't know if you know who he is, but yeah. And so I live in Houston, Texas, and I'll be a senior in high school next year, so I'm 17. And so my question was, so you were talking about how you have like 2 hours of electricity a day. So some regions, like Israel. So like the people that are using your like online Madrasa and like the language learning, are most people able to access Wi-Fi and like do they have internet access, or like is there any way? Yeah. I was just wondering, because like it seems like
that's right. I have a mic, so I can access both Wi-Fi and a mic, and yes, all of them can, because it's important to differentiate between Gaza, which is currently under an Israeli siege, which this is what Muhammad was describing, 2 hours of between 2 to 4 hours, I think, electricity a day inside the Gaza Strip, and Israel. I don't know any place in Israel that has no access to either electricity or. Did that answer?
Yeah, I was just...
Okay, yeah, sure.
Hi, thank you all for coming and joining us. I learned a lot here. I'm currently a program assistant. I work under Andrew and Paula. And my name is Sadia. I go to college right now. I'm a rising junior, and I study in Middle Eastern and North African region. And so I know you all spoke about the importance of having an international role in this conflict, but I was wondering, as a student, for example, I learn about these things in a classroom setting, and I'm not in a position of power in which I can actually create any policy differences. And so I was wondering, as like an American civilian and a young person in the world today, what can we do to show our support for this conflict, especially because, I was born and raised in New York. I unfortunately have not had very many one-on-one interactions daily with Israeli or Palestinian individuals. And so I was wondering, geographically, I may be far away, but I care deeply for this issue. And so how can people like me show our support?
I can answer briefly, and it's a really simple answer that almost sounds like too good to be true, but just tell people, talk. The things you heard here today, share with 5 of your friends. Those 5 people will share with 5 other people, and that is how you get a conversation started. And reach out to people. I mean, there are many Palestinian and Israeli young activists that are more than willing to talk to you and share their stories with you and your friends. There are many events happening in DC specifically that are similar to this. Every day you go on Facebook, you click events, you can filter through, and you see many forums where Palestinians are giving testimonies and their voices, or Israelis. So just personal stories, I think, is the biggest way you can influence people, especially younger people, because we are emotional beings, and
Maybe I can add. Okay, so just very quickly, first of all, you already did, because you translated your interest in the conflict into, hey, I want to do something about it, and that's exactly what we're missing. That's the first step, saying, wow, I mean, there's so much to do and I want to be part of this. 1. 2, you can just join anything that you feel passionate about, and I completely encourage you to look for what you're passionate about. If you think that what we in Madrasa are doing, and you think it's important that Israelis will learn to communicate better and in Arabic, come and join us. We need a lot of help in English, as you can see. If you believe that what Hiba is doing, or any other of our talented delegates here are doing, and you find it important, join them. Or just look, you're interested in music, join the Jerusalem Orchestra and help them with that. There's so many things happening in the ground. Google is a great source for finding them. People is even a better source, and we all luckily have business cards. You can ask us, tell us what you're talented about and want to deal with, and there's so much work to do. What we need is to start doing it, and yeah, I think.
I'll just quickly say that what you see here today with NSL is quite unique. There are very rare appearances of both Israelis and Palestinians sitting on the same stage, sharing personal stories and agreeing to share a stage. What I find very toxic in American colleges and American politics, and unfortunately we see it all over the world, is polarization, and in college campuses it's very, very present. And I think that you being here and wanting to engage in this content, what I see very present about this topic is the pro sides versus being pro solution or pro conversation even. And so I encourage you to be the agent that drives for the movement of pro conversation rather than pro sides, because pro sides will just never take us anywhere, especially in American politics. We all worked in Congress this summer, and we saw the pro-Israel lobbyists and pro-Palestine lobbyists that boycott each other, and where does it take us? So my thing is pro-conversation. If that's the only thing you'll remember from this conversation, that's good.
Last point is well taken up, Steve. I was with the Nine Nations Association. I work with Paula and Andrew. So many of us who are over the age of, let's say, 40 or 50, have lived our entire lives with an expectation that there is a compromise, a conversation, solution politically, not only to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but in every part of the world. And today, that narrative is changing, as you say. There's polarization. And I'm wondering how you, as young people, leading very practical, thoughtful, influential change by conversation and practice, like each of your solutions, do young people in those situations still have an optimism there's an opportunity for a political solution, or is it best to keep your head down and avoid it and focus on the many wonderful things you talked about today, believing that that's the more likely process for change without having to touch the politics that are so heated and radical and difficult? Where are you headed in that perspective?
I think that's such an important question, because people normally look at people to people or peace building and think that it's unrelated to the politics. What I think was missing in the past 100 years of trying to find a solution is the separation, where the political powers that be negotiate a solution and don't include the people to people in the grassroots. I am optimistic that there is a solution, but that solution has to include intersectionality. Intersectionality between a political solution that sides obviously will have to compromise, but we'll also have intersectionality of building a younger generation that wants peace and reconciliation. What we have on the ground today is two generations that are separated, isolated, and are taught to fear and hate the other. And I think the only way forward is to break those barriers. And the people doing the hard work on that are people-to-people programs like New Story Leadership and others. That's my 2 cents.
Worth it all.
Ambassador Wilcox.
And let's take our final round of questions. So if you have any final questions, we'll take them together and then hear back from our New Story leadership friends.
Hi, everybody. My name is Phil Wilcox. I want to congratulate UNA, New Story leadership, and others like you around the world who are doing what you're doing, who believe that peace is possible, that common sense, nonviolence, and tolerance are within reach. Many people have lost hope now. But please give us your thoughts on Israel. There's one school of thought that has said for years that Israel is a dysfunctional country and that perpetuates the conflict. Others say that it's the fault of Israel's adversary and neighbors who increase the sense of vulnerability, of victimhood that has been the curse of the Jewish people for generations. You hear the same narrative among Palestinians as well, who say that we can't solve this problem ourselves. Is there indeed a basic dysfunction in the structure of Israeli and Palestinian politics that maintains this, if anything, deepening separation, hatred, and conflict? And does that mean that there has to be a stronger and more sustained international effort to change public opinion in these two nations? Are they capable of doing it themselves? I think they are, although that would take years and years, because the trend, notwithstanding massive efforts in the last 2 decades to bring these two societies together and to make peace, have frankly failed. So where should the emphasis be? Obviously, we need more of what you are doing to educate people, to teach them each other's languages. But can this happen internally, given experience to date, or must the rest of the world work much harder than they have worked and recognize this not just as a problem of suffering Palestinians and Israelis, or is this really an international problem that demands a much more energetic and thoughtful effort?
Oh, okay. Yes, I mean, can it be solved internally? Yes, I think so. If people will do the right decisions like we are doing, which is choosing the non-violent action and promoting as much understanding as we can, and even the first step is being even able to imagine a shared society, because without this imagination that people don't have, people just are completely disparate, both in Israel and Palestine, we won't be able to work towards it. Does it mean that the international society needs to push less? I don't know. I only need the international society to act not in a polarized way, because if they will keep on being polarizing and will be either pro-Israel or pro-Palestine, maybe there will be even more conflicts in the world. And I think this is what, at least I see. I'm looking on countries and, oh, this one is, are you with us, are you not with us? Some of our delegates is using the term of a football game. You're either, I'm not good with sports, but I know that there are 2 teams. So you're either with this team or that team. And I think we need to invent another sport game that is not a zero-sum game. And when this game will be there, the international community will be more than welcome to play it. But at the moment, if they want to play football, like, it's not, I just don't see it productive, unless something else that I'm not aware of. But we are working internally, and I always say that I'm working on the Israeli society because I'm not willing to and not supposed to tell Palestinians what to do. So I'm trying to work on my own society to make it all that I explained. And I think that if each one of us chooses to work on his own community, that's great. So I mean, your question is obviously beautiful, but I think that each and every one of us in the room needs to ask what his or her own community is doing in order to promote a better reality for everyone. Yes.
If I may add to that real quick, my name is Anna. I'm the Israeli Managing Director of New Story Leadership. And well, I may be biased because I studied international relations, so I'm a huge fan of the international community and the UN efforts to move things internationally. I would say it's not mutually exclusive. We're working hard, the peace community as an Israeli, I can say, to change things from within, but I really appreciate when there is pressure from outside, and I think we need both, because it's such a difficult conflict to solve. We definitely need both at the same time in order to change something, but that's my personal opinion. Anybody want to add, or we can just close? Another question? Okay.
I think we encourage dialogue after finishing the program. I'm going to encourage Paula to do the honors of final thank yous, but I'll share my quick reflection on the last points that were raised, that just as the United Nations, a central theme today, is at its heart, if it's nothing else, it needs to be a forum for dialogue and for understanding. And it's very clear that that's the basis for the types of changes that at least those in this room today wish to see between Israel and Palestinians. But that the last question was such a hard one, we could spend an entire evening and longer talking about it, and it's very clear that it's a generational change that will be required to shift public opinion, and who better than, of course, those that will inherit the situation, are already living the situation, the younger generation, to be in it for the long term and do the painstaking work that will be needed, dialogue and understanding, to build the bridges and overcome all of the tensions and misunderstanding and distrust. So with that, I would kindly ask Paula, though, and I'll say that we're very thankful to have been part of this program. Paula.
Absolutely. And change needs to happen, I believe, at all levels. And I think the UN, as imperfect as it is sometimes, is the best platform and vehicle that all countries and at all levels are available to intergenerational participants. And I think at the end of the day is that kind of drive and motivation that we both show and encourage everyone to take action. There is a movement right now that is recognizing more and more the contributions that young people are making into the peace processes. So thank you so much, first of all, to Stimson Center for hosting us this evening, and also for being an organizing partner along with I keep dropping the microphone. New Story Leadership and the New Story Leadership, and to all of you, to our participating summer students, for your time engaging with members of Congress and others, and really telling your story. Storytelling is incredibly important in as many spaces as you can. So thank you to the staff of all of these organizations, and we hope that this is the beginning of many more dialogues that we can build from here. Through Model UN, through young professionals. There's a network of, if you're interested, there's a network of UNAs around the world, network of 100 UNAs. So join the movement. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you once again. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you.